Thank you, and good morning. Great to have you here, and welcome to the panelists. I'm going to start off with a couple of questions and then throw open most of the discussions to my fellow panelists. And around 35 minutes from now, I'm going to open it up for questions. We have some pre-populated questions by which we can ask you for some responses, but it'll be an open house also for you to ask questions to the panelists. Okay, so largely we're going to talk about, what does big data mean? What is the impact it can create? Where does it come from? What can we do about it? And what are the ethical questions around big data? So let me just start with that first. So I will start with the panelists on the left, and we'll talk about what's the definition of big data from your perspective?
I think to put it very simply, I mean, there are lots of official definitions of it, right? But I think to put it very simply, any data which is large enough, which comes from varied sources, which is a continuous data that comes at you and is large enough for a human mind to compute or a cluster of people to compute, that's really big data, right? It's really contextual. I mean, if I had a team of 100 people who were just looking at this data, for them the context of big would be much larger. If there was a team of 10, it would be much lesser, which is why then you get into computing. But very basic, that's really what big data for me is.
Okay. Anu, what's your definition when you look at it from the employee perspective?
So I'll be a little controversial.
Sure.
I think big data is not data.
Okay.
Right? And I think I heard some presentations prior to our session where big data is a lot more about analytics and the inferences we are drawing from some of this data. And I think, as he rightly put it, it can come from various sources. But we tend to use big data analytics quite interchangeably. So one is source, and then finally what you want to do, which is the outcome. And I would kind of look at it together. But big data is data that leads to a certain inference. And, and then it becomes a function of which data we're looking, how we are looking, and what inferences we are drawing from it.
Okay, so yes, that was the topic actually I wanted to talk a little bit more about. And coming to you, should we look at the insight of big data, or should we look at the impact it creates? And also from the perspective of when you look at the impact, what kind of impact organizations can draw from or can bank upon from big data?
We are a IT services consulting company, and I want to probably share a bit of thoughts from what we do with data and what we are trying to achieve through, especially in the areas of impact in the realms of people and talent, right? So as a consulting company, our real driver with using analytics and data is to be able to make our consultants and our engineers better, right, in their work. So just like, for example, a company like Facebook or Google would gather a lot of data about the individuals and then use that data to drive targeted advertisements, and that's how they make money out of the vast amount of data that they collect, and then use that, analyze that, and target. So we're trying to use a very similar approach in our consulting. And for example, a lot of the knowledge that we have in the company resides in conversations, right? And so we have a digital platforms like Yammer, which gathers a lot of that conversations, and we're trying to extract that insights out of that conversation. We try to extract insights out of our HR systems, our project management systems. So we use that data to be able to drive then insights at the point of need. For example, we have a new engineer join the company, starting on a project. Our platform can go and tell them, hey, we noticed that you joined the company last week. You have this kind of background. And the project that you're doing, here are the 2 other people who can help you, which have done similar work in the previous project. Or here's are the 2 other people in some other part of the company who can help you drive this work better. So really being able to bring insights at the point of need, driving using big data is one example that we've been able to have some baby steps, if you like, in the company. And so we've done that at the engineering level, we've done some of that at the sales level, really harness the insights and the intelligence that you have in the company in front of our people at the point of need.
Okay, so Anu, coming to you, have you been able to create any impact from the analytics, as you said, or looking at big data, analyzing it, and creating some impact for the organization?
So in Citi, we have 3 global HR analytics center. One is in Mumbai, other is in Tampa, and one is in Europe. And actually, very recently, probably a few months back, we ran a project to look at some factors and some trends in recruiting, in hiring, in turnover, and in rewards.
Okay.
And I can't share all of it, but I'll share a couple of things we found which were correlated, not necessarily causative. But we found that in our leadership team, we have 15 people, of which 12 have had more than 2 country assignments. They worked across 2 different products or businesses. And on the demographic front, they all have 2 children, and they come from tier 2 towns. So this was data which was given to us. And as we were looking at it, we were trying to figure out how we can leverage it. We could clearly leverage the fact that there is this whole rotation bit, which is giving people some exposure and getting them ready for a leadership role, the way we have it in city. And leadership roles may vary from organization to organization. But when I looked at demographics, I wasn't going to necessarily jump and say, how many children do you intend to have, or which town you come from, because there was a correlation that maybe smaller families, or there was a correlation that maybe tier 2 towns were churning people with a little more hunger. That was an inference or a data for us to keep. So that was what happened with the hiring bit. We also found that there were campuses where we had better rates in terms of attrition over a period of, better rates in terms of retention over a period of 5 years. So obviously it implied that we step up our intake because we are doing something right in terms of engagement, onboarding. And there were campuses which could be, your top 2 campuses in India, but we have very high attrition rates because maybe they are very highly aspirational and we're not being able to cater to that. So we had to align a hiring strategy to that, which created a different impact for the business. If I look at the reward space, what we found that, in terms of data, that when we're looking at retention, counter offers are not always effective. So it was a very good data point because we realized that counter offers actually tend to encourage more employees to come with offers in their hand. So the more counter offers you start to do, the likelihood is your attrition rate will go higher. So we became very careful in the way we now do counter offers when people are, resigning and we want to retain them, because finally retention is a function of many other aspects apart from compensation. In terms of, in the learning space, for example, when we were, looking at what works and what doesn't work, and some of what was said in the earlier discussions really resonated with me, because some of our online learning wasn't necessarily working for us. And we put in a lot of money, but people wanted more interactive learning. So it wasn't really online learning, but I think the way the modules were put online did not create that stickiness. What they wanted was more like videos or somebody they could engage with. And actually the classroom engagement was lesser, but it seems to serve the purpose for us today, especially for some of the more senior level programs. So I think this was a very recent exercise, and for me, that was very valuable when I took it back to the management team and the CEO, looking at some of these trends and what we needed to do to align some of the people strategies.
So let me ask you a question there. Was this all done by HR teams, or this data was churned by somebody else?
So the data, as I said, we have 3 centers globally.
Yes.
I'm beneficiary because one is in Mumbai. It's a global center.
Okay.
But don't tell them I said this here, but I'm also their HR, so I get some freebies.
Okay.
So it was done by them. The churning of the data was done by them because I think, there are certain tools which they were using, which I don't think all of us in the team were equipped enough to use.
Okay.
But I think what I was interested was the end output and the trends which were emerging from that data, where there was a correlation and where there was a causative relationship which was driving that out.
So coming to you, Atul, I'm going to rake a different kind of a topic here and talk to you from the perspective of privacy of the data, right? And all the things which we do on our mobile and the searches, we do everything. The cookies is where we're leaving the crumbs for others to pick up. How ethical it is to use that kind of data to churn various kinds of things, while obviously HR, we have kind of given our lives to the organizations by writing on and signing the appointment letters, and they can use the data the way they want. But is there a privacy issue there? And what are some of the ethical issues which can come up when we want to use that kind of data?
So I think there's definitely privacy issues. There are ethical issues, but more than that, the core is not being informed enough. So you spoke about cookies and things like that, right? I mean, one of the early users of big data, were the internet companies, right? I mean, the Amazons of the world. I mean, we all know how they use data. Now, in most cases, we invariably go out and give out a lot of data about ourselves without knowing what are your consumer rights, without knowing what are the optimal way of surfing when you are there, right? Now, this could be argued, saying that, there's actually somewhere you have accepted the terms and conditions and you have given access to it, right? The other argument is that, no, you should have spelled it out because the consumer really doesn't know. So it is definitely a gray area, and I think it's going to continue to be that for some time. There will be various forms that will come in to protect you from that. I mean, since you spoke about cookies and I'm talking about online advertising, ad block is one way of that, where you're really empowering the consumer and saying that, okay, I don't want people to give me ads depending on what data I've given out there. But yes, it's definitely there. And I think ethics, in terms of ethics, I think it really depends from organization to organization. It really depends on the individual who's running it. What is the take that they have on it? So it's, I mean, it's really
you've been very diplomatic. I'm going to drive that question a little bit harder on you. So should HR use that data? Can I use the data, from, let's say I'm going on Facebook and, you come to me as a company and say, I have Rajan's data from Facebook and LinkedIn, and I can tell you the patterns. And you are Anu, who's the head of HR, and I can do a predictive analysis on saying who are the guys who are going to leave, who are the guys who are already watching competition, and saying that those things look attractive, and they're my top talent. And I come to you and say, I can give you all the data. I can do a predictive analysis of attrition for you by using LinkedIn and Facebook. Would you buy that?
Yes. So in fact,
would you buy that? Anu, would you buy that data? He's saying he will buy it. Would you buy that data that
I'll tell you what. I don't know whether I'll buy that data, but I've done that analysis already when I didn't talk about the attrition.
Then you're in hot water already. So is that ethical?
So what happened was, in fact, my human capital reporting head, she came to me with about 1,000 my talent and said, we predict that in the next 18 to 24 months, these employees are at high risk of attrition. But Anu, you will prove it wrong because now you will do an intervention to retain them. So actually my prediction will go for a toss. So I think what you do with that data drives the ethics around that data. So I may take the report from an intent of saying, I want to actually retain some of my talent and not necessarily lash out because somebody is looking out at the market. It's quite a common thing to do.
But I, as an employee, never gave you the right to use the data for whichever way you wanted to use it.
No, it's not about the right. I'm saying if you have conceded on Facebook and LinkedIn, it's out there. In fact, since you brought this up, I actually want to take it into hotter waters when you talk about medical, right? This is only looking at the market, which I think is actually, I wouldn't be too perturbed about it either ways. I'll figure it out because if I don't get it from LinkedIn, there are enough headhunters who come and tell us who's in the market. So either ways, we would know. But I think when you look at the medical stuff, that is what really worries our employees, and especially the mid-level to senior level. We give for example, we have a policy where you can have a free medical checkup, a comprehensive free medical checkup up to X number of thousands of rupees. The bank will pay for it fully. Utilization rate, 10% of the 15,000 employees that I have. Question why? Because one, the younger ones think they are invincible, so nothing's going to ever happen to them. The older ones are actually very worried because they feel that what if I have a medical problem and that report is amenable to the organization, how will they look at me? So one is the fear of discovering something is wrong with me, which actually is not a good thing because if something's wrong with you, you better correct it. And the second is, if the organization knows that I'm suffering from, say, a heart condition or a liver condition or whatever it may be, how will they look at me? And there is this fear. And that's where my dilemma comes in more because I've had situations where I know when the report comes in that this employee's got, some issue, what do you do with it? And how do you deal with it?
Madhu, what are your views on that?
Yeah, I would say there's a fine line, where, you can sometimes cross and sometimes you have to understand where the line is. And I think as long as the employees are aware that you're using that data, then it's fine, right? I think it's really become unethical if you start using the data without the consent of the people who have the data. And a lot of the time when we do stuff that we trying to benchmark privacy data, where we use privacy data based on the European standards, right? Where you really have a very high standard of privacy. And I think if it works there, I think it'll work everywhere else. But I think the line really remains where, does people give consent? And you'll find a lot of the younger guys not so concerned about the privacy, compared to the older generation, right? As long as that data, giving certain data out to the, website or a company, if that gives you benefits out of that, right? And then you will probably willingly give that.
So let me ask you another question from a different perspective, and more to say that about HR versus non-HR. Do you think the non-HR functions, sales and marketing, and do a better job of looking at big data and giving value to the organization versus HR? The kind of value HR adds versus other functions when they look at big data.
Yeah, so I can probably share some insights based on the things that we do, and as a company we have a big data practice which works with other companies to drive, and I think 99% of that work that we do for other companies are not in HR.
Okay.
They are in, really customer, finding out customer churn, fraud detection, in that kind of work, and or predictions of, whether, things like that is where I think more big data work that we see getting done today. And I think in HR, there isn't as much going on, predominantly because the data is not there. The quality of data is not there. The companies haven't instrument themselves enough to gather that data so that you don't have right kind of data to be able to get into things like attrition prediction. Maybe a few companies are really doing that, but it's not that easy to do if you don't really have the systems of record and way to get the data from your internal systems as well as external systems, right? So the bigger challenge I see in more people analytics and people-related data is really the data itself. We really don't have the data.
Atul, what are your views? Because you've been using data for a long time, and you ran that kind of practice for a long time. What's your view, HR versus non-HR?
No, I completely agree. I think, if you see out there, the application in the non-HR space for big data, I think it's really widespread. We have a portfolio of about 7-8 investments that we've done in the last year or so. None of them are big data companies, as in they don't offer that as a service, but all of them use big data to run their business. So I would say that, yes, there's a huge disparity there. I think, and we've seen some examples here, we've read up a lot of innovations that happen. HR is a great space for big data to actually come in and make it easy for everybody, from the employees to the employer, but it's a huge, huge gap. So, if you look at simple things like companies, look at people like Salesforce and all, right? Today, even a mid-sized company with 25, 30 people has a Salesforce of this. Would they have a similar thing for HR? I really doubt.
Okay. Coming to you, we talked about how organization benefits from big data, etc. How does an employee benefit from what data he's the source. He's throwing up all this data, and he's not getting anything back. At least that's what I think.
Yeah. So I'll come to that question, but I just also want to take this HR
versus non-HR. Yes. I was going to grill you on that a little later, but that's okay. You take the opportunity now.
I do agree that there has been some lag between the P&L functions versus support functions. And having been in a support function, I can tell you that because you don't see quick return on an investment, when there is a investment to be made in any infrastructure function, not just HR. It could be compliance, it could be legal. It's put at the back burner, not necessarily by HR, but by the CEO.
Okay.
So the question is, what does the CEO want to prioritize? And I would leave HR out of this. Why is people analytics at the back of the queue? It's the same. People is not necessarily just my forte to go out and get an investment for.
Okay.
Why do the business heads? And I understand the consumer side, I understand the customer side, but that focus is not necessarily on the employee side because it doesn't give me a quick buck on the investment that I'm making. Well, it's a little more midterm, it's a little more long term. My results are driven quarterly. shareholders are tracking me quarterly. So, you know, ek saal ke baad kya hoga later, let's figure out how we sort this quarter. So I think there's a larger debate.
So can we shift the focus there? So let's say if you were to go to your CEO and say, hey, you know, I know what are the 3 productivity levers we need to fix for me to get at the better revenue, which is exactly the kind of thing he would like to know. Can HR with big data predict that? What are the 3 big productivity levers?
Yeah, so that's what we did with this exercise. So actually this exercise was really an answer to that question. Even if I look at our reporting and analytics unit in Citi, we are blessed to have them, but the fact is their tools that they're using, I think needs an upgrade. There is a combination of manual work and some technical tools. I have, you know, a big hub in India wherein you have scorecards which are being churned globally, and they have fantastic touch technology for the business heads. I've been battling year on year and saying, why can't I get touch technology for my business head? Why does my CEO have to ask me? He can access it online. He can say, oh, I want to see turnover. I want to see hiring in this city at this point of time and how it's working. So I'm just saying, I think it's less about an HR agenda. It's the question is how do we make it the center of a CEO agenda and how it we show it's
certainly
kind of
in politics it is, right? Because the Trumps of the world, the Modi government, everybody is using that people data to win elections, to do something of that sort. So I'm going to come back to you on that a little bit. What's your view? When politicians use this kind of data and we give this access to all of them all the time and they're using it, and the Trump is a big controversy on that, what are your views on that?
So I think Trump's case is you know, interesting, right? I think we've seen, you know,
whatever you say here will be held against you.
That is the case any which way.
We're letting out data. So I think they, you know, I don't know how many of you guys, you know, looked at what they did. They hired this company called Cambridge Analytics, which is a company based in England. Essentially, they have over the years have gathered data around American people, you know, based on, you know, Facebook and multiple places and surveys and so forth. And apparently every single, almost every single person in America, they have about 4,000 to 5,000 data points. You know, how they eat, how they live, what they read, what they shop, and so forth, right? They use this data and use a technique called psychographing, and to really figure out what kind of message that they would like to hear. And that's what apparently Trump had used in driving his messaging. You know, so essentially a algorithm help him win, or you know, analytics help him win. So I think there's data out there which is I don't think there's anything wrong with data which is out there to be used to derive insights, right? You know, today that insights come from you know, in experts and who have probably have using an expert group to get that data. Now here what's happening is really a lot of these experts are getting replaced with a better accurate algorithms, right? And if you ask the question whether it's right or wrong, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with, you know, using data which is out there. That's what we would do anyway, right? If as a person.
Atul, your views.
Yeah, I think to answer your question, why politicians have been using it and why they've pretty much been on the forefront is, I think data is their core. I mean, it runs what they do. End of the day, it's about the electorate. It's about how many people will come out there and vote. It's all about numbers. So there cannot be a better category where there's a fit for application of something like this. So it's a no-brainer for them. On the Trump one, I think it's too much to comprehend for any kind of data, right? I mean, if you really ask me, I don't think it's about a failure or victory for data. I think big data was used by both sides. Right? Like he said, right, Cambridge Analytica used it in a much better way. By the way, they were the same guys who worked for the Leave campaign for Brexit. So they got it right twice. I mean, when the whole world was saying no. I mean, New York Times said 99% she'll win 24 hours before, right? And they also used data to say that. So I think, so big data was used everywhere. So I think it was a victory for big data. It's just that one of them won.
So coming back to you, Anu, why are the CEOs not getting it? If the national leaders get it, and they say that, you know, we can, from people leaving cookies behind or from their Facebook or et cetera, can actually make an impact by winning elections and going in, you know, all big guns to do something like that. Why do the CEOs don't get it? That people analytics is the thing, even for anything you do, whether it's the consumer, whether it is the people inside, whether it's employees, why don't they get it?
I think that I mean, from my experience, it's probably the articulation between the P&L and the people analytics is not yet very clear to them. They get the fact that it's important. I mean, finally, the business is about people. But it's, when you come to hard dollars, because nothing, as you said, can be just done, on a spreadsheet, it's a huge investment. I can tell you in Citi, for example, we're debating globally about 2 very big systems, which, are future of what we're going to do in terms of HR technology. I mean, we're talking of a few $100 million investment. Now, that kind of investment and commitment takes a much longer, is my experience, in terms of putting up a business case in the way it will work. There are some CEOs who are willing to look at it from a 24 or a 3-year perspective in terms of returns, and some are looking for a quicker return in 6 months. It's that 6 months is what we
How come marketing is able to sell it? How come marketing is able to sell those kind of things, saying that, okay, spend 200 million and your return will be 600 million, and HR is not?
Because I think there's a straight direct link to the consumer when you look at sales and marketing. And
no, I'm not talking about sales. I'm talking about marketing. Marketing is all prediction.
Yeah, but I'm saying if you look at a marketing campaign and you're looking at an advertising campaign which is going out, you can link to the fact that you launched a campaign and how your brand recall or your sales went up. There is a link. I think what we need to do is a better articulation of how people, engagement, motivation, bottom line. And I think everybody gets it intellectually.
Yep.
But I think pragmatically, when you go out there and saying, okay, this is how it links up, and this is the time frame that I'm working out. Marketing can produce that in 1 month, and I think that HR will take a little longer than 1 month to give the same kind of interlinkages.
So is it, so it's again going to be a controversial question. Is it a failure of HR?
I don't think it's a failure of HR. I think, I know of enough HR teams. First of all, I think my belief, if I step out of analytics, every business gets the HR they deserve. So
okay.
if you start with that,
okay.
The question is, what is the CEO looking for? Because if he's the head honcho or she's the head honcho of the organization, what is the support structure which is supporting you on this agenda looking like? Assuming that you want somebody who's very, very strategic, very people-driven, and is forward-looking, I think those CHROs would challenge this more than enough. And you would find much more of these activities happening there. I mean, I know a number of organizations where this is going on. It's taken time to convince them to get them there, but they see the light at the end of the tunnel.
So, Madhu, if you were to look at data, and a little bit from the Trump perspective, can HR become the big daddy? And the 1984 comes all alive because HR have access to all kinds of things. I have, by the way, I'm forgetting the name of the organization, which has now a small little thing on the ID cards, which is right up here, and when 2 people interact, they can actually see what's happening in that interaction. And they analyze all that for performance management. And can HR turn into big daddy?
Can HR turn to big daddy? Yeah, I think if you really look at a lot of the traditional stuff that we do in HR, right, and probably instead of becoming big daddy, I think it may be taken away from HR because an algorithm can do this kind of stuff, right?
Okay.
And I think what we have to probably think about it, how do we use that insights and data and transform into a kind of better or different way of driving people performance, right? And I think with big data, you probably have HR. The way we do HR traditionally probably have to get transformed, right?
Okay.
I think we are really putting more insights now at the point of need and at the hands of people who can make the decisions, right? You get a lot of that stuff put in, so the traditional processing side of HR probably get replaced by an algorithm, right? And you really have to think about now more in the earlier keynote presentation, really thinking about designing the experience. How do you really, get into the more human side of HR, right? And that's where really probably the web HR can really be the big daddy, but not on the data. I don't think, if your focus is around data, it's a matter of time that it becomes fully automated and, algorithm will take over. But the experience side and really driving the relationships and driving the human side of HR, HR probably have to get a lot more human to really stay ahead.
I see it going the other way around. What's your view, Atul? Does HR have to be the only human people? Everybody, even the CEO is a human, right? So why does the responsibility of being human come to HR? It's everybody's job, leader's job too, right? Any leader's job. And if a leader is asking for more data insights, etc., will HR turn more into data churning machines, or would they be really going forward and becoming this human side, so to say? Instead of big daddy, they'll become the big mama.
So, I mean, to answer your human question, I think it comes from the branding itself, right? It's human resources. So, I mean, that's how it was meant to be.
Okay.
Okay, so I think then it's really
No,
semantics.
Google calls it people operations. So you can brand it differently and get different results.
But I think on a serious note, I think you will definitely see more and more tech-enabled HR functions. You will see more and more adoption of technology, innovations happening there. And when you say big daddy, I mean, are you saying in context of sales and other areas?
No, I'm saying, they know about every employee every time, right? If you give mobile and access to, let's say, any department, it doesn't matter whether it's HR or not, I can actually track you whether you're in a cinema hall or you're actually doing a sales call. I can know it, right? Or you're having lunch for 2 hours versus you're with a customer for 2 hours. All that can be tracked. So everything about an employee can be tracked if given an access.
No, it can be, but I'm saying that still will not change the paradigm, what she spoke about, right? I mean, if there's going to be a sales-driven objective or a quarterly-driven objective, you will still see larger monies going into your typical areas of sales, marketing, and things like that. So by doing these things, if you think that, HR is going to lead and have more, be really the biggest investment for a company area, I don't think that's going to happen. But having said that, I think these lines are really, vanishing. Like you said, I mean, this could be a human resource tool or it could be a sales tracker tool. I mean, you don't know. What is it? I mean, I come back to the Salesforce example. Is Salesforce a sales tool or is it actually making the guy perform better? Right? I mean, if they had launched it as an HR tool, I don't think they would have been as big as where they are.
So it's
right?
branding.
No, but end of the day, that's what it's doing, right? It's making the guy perform better. There's much more that you can add. So I think some of these will blur.
I think that the big daddy and the big mama probably will be an algorithm. Right? It's probably not going to be a department.
I think the way I see it evolving won't be a big daddy role, but it's much more focused on employee experience. Okay. How do you increase productivity? And how we can partner with the business heads much better to do that. Even if I have data, which I have today, I wouldn't necessarily want to control and be intrusive with an employee. But I would want to leverage it to enhance the engagement or enhance the productivity. For example, if I find out that an employee is disengaged, say away from office, sure. Then you have to address it and say, how do you get him or her engaged? So I see our role evolving as more employee experience managers and tech enabling us to manage the scale that we have to manage. And then we are probably, doing a much more true advisory role for the CEO. In my world, I always say, if you have good HR functions, you typically don't need a COO or a CAO.
Okay,
because,
so some jobs are under threat here.
Yeah, well, because I feel that, a good HR person is for internal management. Okay. When your CEO and business heads focused on the client. And I think, yes, it will require some mindset shift. It will require some skill sets which have to be changed. But, from where I sit and the industry that I work in, I see that's where we are going.
So is the future role of HR going to change a little bit? Because HR has always been branded or blamed or said, these are fuzzy, kind of guys. They don't get hard numbers. They don't, do all that stuff. Do you think that the future HR professionals have to be as hard about data as maybe a finance guy, or at least their understanding, their ability to comprehend that kind of data, to say, okay, exactly coming back to what you said, causality versus correlation, just simple things like that. And many HR, pardon me saying, I belong to the same community, many people just don't get it. They don't understand the difference between a causality versus a correlation. And do you think that kind of transition is needed, is necessary, and should be done?
I think the transition's already happening, in my view. I think our business needs it. It also demands from us, and we have to step up to it. I don't think that's an option anymore. And as far as, the HR role is concerned, I think from the time I've entered the profession, we've had this debate about what's role of HR. But there is also a contrary view about what talent we have in HR and how do we develop it to what the future vision is. I think very often I find in different organizations, also the guy can't do sales, acha HR mein dal do. Which I don't think is the way to staff your talent function. And that's where I come back to the point I made earlier, where every business or every CEO gets the HR they deserve. You know, there are CEOs you'll work with who'll say, look, I don't want a debate, I want execution. Versus there'll be a CEO who'll say, no, I want an alter ego. And, you know, you decide which way you want to work and how you want to work with them.
Okay, great. So I've been given a signal that I might overrun. I don't want to do that. I want to open it up to the audience for some questions here, and then I'm going to put up some questions back here for some answers from all of you. But questions, all right, that lady in the white there.
So I heard someone in the panel saying that HR lacks the data. However, there is a lot of data, say on Glassdoor, unstructured data. So what are companies doing about it, and are companies really good at social listening and doing or planning to do something about that data?
Do you use Glassdoor?
Yeah, we use Glassdoor a lot because I'll tell you what, the day the compensation is given out, it's all on Glassdoor. Right? So in banking, everybody knows what has been paid at analyst level, associates level, and so forth, so on. And I think the branding, for example, how are people perceiving a brand? Glassdoor is a very valuable source of information. So it's not just Glassdoor, it's Glassdoor, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So we do scan it. And we kind of get some trends, both regionally at the country level. I remember using Glassdoor a lot in London because it's much more prevalent, especially for the rewards. And a lot of people rely on Glassdoor before they accept our offers. Okay. So it is important that we keep a pulse of what's happening. And sometimes what's on social media is perception. Yep. Perception are not realities always, but then people's reaction towards you is always governed by the perception they have of you as an organization. So if we feel something is trending in an inappropriate direction, we need to get in there and correct it. So yes, it is something we look at.
Okay, we'll go to that gentleman there in the blue, and then we'll come back to you, sir.
My question is about security. We know LinkedIn's got hacked. A lot of internet companies, user data gets hacked. What I'm really worried about is the personally identifiable data that resides in HR systems and the kind of misuse or the people-specific vulnerabilities that what are organizations doing to safeguard employee data from getting hacked, either internally or externally?
Madhu, would you like to take that up?
Yeah,
because you have much more serious data with you.
Yeah, so I mean, the data security is a big focus for I think most companies, and I can tell you from my experience that it's one of the biggest priorities for us as in my role as a CIO for the company. So we do a couple of things. Obviously, inside the company, we've set up data leak prevention platforms to be able to monitor, understand that proactively as if things are happening, and at the same time, the other big strategy, at least that we've adopted, is to put that in most secure cloud environments where the cloud companies have a lot better security than the security that you have inside your four walls in the company, right? So, as a strategy that we have put in a lot of the stuff on the secure clouds, whether it's Oracle or Microsoft or so forth, which really gives you that ability to protect because they have a data leak prevention and all that kind of stuff built into some of these environments that we're using. But it's a cat and mouse game. I think it's always security is something that evolving, and at the rate that you are advancing your defenses and your thing, then the threats also advance at the same rate. So it's a priority that I think will continue to be in companies, and especially in the CIO priority list, that it's the big driver, and it'll continue to be because it's evolving, right? It's never done.
People are using data as business analytics. Is it big data means big business analytics or something different? Number one. Number two, when you're sharing an information on public domain or Facebook, it may be your copy, but people can use it. Ethical and unethical doesn't come. It's my opinion.
So as an organization, we understand that how organization gains from big data. So the point that you mentioned was how an employee gains, because if you are working in a senior position, you also understand people know about it, that they are being followed, or they know that there's somebody watching you, right? And this is not a very comfortable feeling. But what if, so I would like to understand the perspective that you raised. How does an employee gain out of big data? So if an HR knows about it, the health issues an employee is facing, and if I'm that employee, so how am I gaining up from it?
So, Anu, answer that briefly, but you want to.
Sure. So I think there are various aspects to it, and I'll just take it in different ways. So one is we talked about the health bit, where we would share the data with employees, and we actually, wellness is a big focus for us this year. So we are really, really pushing it hard in terms of what we discover, and we actually go out and counsel them. The second is around performance trends, and for example, very often people are always looking at what do I want to do next, right? And many conversations I have is, oh, I want to do something different. And my question would be, what do you want to do? What do you think I should do? And I said, I don't know the answer, because I can't, you need to know what you need to do, and then I can take you there. But at that point of time is where you need to share more data with the employees, because there are different people who've had a similar profile like yours, and this is where they have reached. Or if you want to do a general management job, these are 5 or 6 jobs which can get you there, because that's what we have seen. Or you want to be an M&A banker, well, these are the skill sets you need to do, and hence you need to go through these learning programs. A lot of this is available because, especially for the senior leaders, as you rightly said, the profile is very easily available. I think what organization, and I also struggle sometimes, is how do I package it and give it to them? And for that, you need infrastructure, which I don't, even at my end, I feel we need an upgrade to the extent we can make it available more easily to employees. Today, if somebody was to come to us, we can put it in a, spreadsheet and share it with you. We can pull, from a reporting team or analytics team and give you some data, but to put it comprehensively, and saying there is a report, this is the analytic, this is what's indicating, and this is the recommendation. I think we're a little further away from that. But having said that, we always don't wait for utopia. I think we leverage what we have, and we try and maximize and optimize it for our employees.
One last thing related to it. Is it important to share the report that that we have as an HR to the employees as well? That, okay, this is the data that we have and this is the report? What do you suggest?
So data pertaining to them?
Yes.
Yeah, I think they should know it. And sometimes when we're sharing, say, performance data, right, which is over the years, not as a part of appraisal.
Right.
You've gone through these 5, 6 assignments, this is how you performed, these were your needs, these were your strengths, and this is how you performed. I think that's a very transparent conversation, and we would share it with the employee. In many organizations, for example, the debate is, and I'm just deviating here a bit, should you share their high potentials or not? Not because that employee wouldn't be happy, but others would be unhappy.
Yeah, true. That's
right.
Yeah.
So you do have that debate.
Yes.
But I think we took a decision that we will share that, right? Because I think it's to retain a top caliber or top talent employee, for them to know that their high potential is a motivator in themselves.
Right.
And then it's our responsibility to manage the rest of the employees and let them aspire to be a top talent. By disclosing who's the top talent, you're also setting the tone about what you define as a top talent.
Okay.
So I think the transparency bit is important. If I put myself as an employee and not as HR, I would appreciate if I'm told things as they are.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think that's the time we had. Thank you, everybody.